My sister said, "Donald only gets respect when he pays for it." My aunt laughed. "That's why we keep him around." I didn't say a word, just pulled out the deed to the house they've lived in rent-free for years and slid it across the table with one sentence. "You have 15 days. I-34M had always been the family ATM. That's not bitterness talking, it's just fact. For the past 8 years, since I sold my first software company, I'd been the one everyone called when rent was due, when car payments were late, when someone needed bail money or medical bills covered. I never said no. That was my mistake. The comment came during what was supposed to be a celebration dinner at my house. My second company had just been acquired for an amount that made my accountant actually gasp on the phone. I'd invited the family over, my sister, her husband, my aunt, my mother. I'd even paid for catering because I wanted it to be special. I wanted to share this moment with the people who were supposed to matter most. I was in the kitchen grabbing more wine when I heard it. The layout of my house carries sound in strange ways, and their voices traveled perfectly from the dining room. My sister's voice was unmistakable, that particular tone she used when she thought she was being clever. She said I only got respect when I paid for it. Said it like it was a punchline, like I was a joke. Then my aunt laughed. That sharp, cutting laugh that had made me feel small since I was a kid. She said that's why they kept me around. Like I was a pet. Like I was useful furniture. I stood there holding a bottle of wine that cost more than most people's car payments, and something inside me just went quiet. Not angry, not yet. Just quiet. That dangerous kind of quiet where you suddenly see everything clearly for the first time. I walked back into the dining room and set the wine down carefully. Everyone was still smiling, still enjoying the expensive meal I'd provided in the expensive house I'd bought. My sister was wearing the necklace I'd given her for her birthday. My aunt had driven here in the car I'd co-signed for when her credit was too destroyed to get approved. I didn't sit down. I just excused myself and went to my office. The thing about being careful with money, even when you have it, is that you keep good records. I pulled out my filing cabinet and started going through folders. It didn't take long to find what I needed. The house my sister and her husband lived in wasn't theirs. It was mine. I'd bought it 6 years ago when they were facing eviction, told them they could live there rent-free until they got on their feet. 6 years later, they were still there. Still rent-free. The deed had my name on it, clear as day. My aunt's situation was even simpler. She'd been living in my rental property downtown for 4 years. I'd never charged her a dime. The property was worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000, and she'd been staying there like it was her birthright. I made copies of both deeds. Then I drafted 2 simple notices. 15 days to vacate. Legally, I should have given them more time, but I also had documentation of their rent-free arrangements. There was no formal lease, which meant they were essentially guests who'd overstayed their welcome. My lawyer had explained this to me once during a casual conversation about investment properties. I came back to the dining room with the documents in a folder. Everyone was laughing about something, drinking my wine, eating my food. My mother was smiling in that vague way she had, probably half lost in her own thoughts like always. She was the only one who'd never asked me for anything, which should have told me something. I sat down and pulled out the first deed, my sister's house. I slid it across the table to her along with the notice to vacate. I kept my voice level, almost casual. I told her she had 15 days. The laughter died like someone had flipped a switch. My sister picked up the paper, her face going from confused to pale in about 3 seconds. She asked me what this was, what I was doing. Her voice had that edge of panic that people get when they realize they've miscalculated badly. I said she'd just told me I only got respect when I paid for it. I said I was done paying. Then I slid the second deed to my aunt. Same notice. 15 days. My aunt's face did something complicated, shock, then anger, then this desperate attempt at a smile like maybe I was joking. She said I couldn't be serious. She said we were family. I asked her if family was something you kept around for utility. If that's what I was to them. No one had an answer for that. My sister's husband tried to jump in, saying I was being rash, that feelings were hurt, but we could talk about this. He'd always been the peacemaker, mostly because he'd been living off my generosity as long as my sister had. I told him he had 15 days too. The house wasn't in his name any more than it was in hers. My mother finally spoke up, asking me if I was sure about this. Not telling me not to do it, just asking if I was sure. I loved her for that. She'd always been the only one who treated me like a person instead of a resource. I was sure. My sister tried a different approach. She reminded me of all the times she'd been there for me growing up, how she protected me from bullies in school, how family was supposed to stick together. It was a good speech. It might have worked if I hadn't just heard her laugh about keeping me around for my money. I let her finish, then pointed out that I'd been sticking together just fine. I'd paid for her wedding. I'd covered her husband's medical bills when he lost his job. I'd bought her kids' school supplies and Christmas presents and birthday gifts. I'd been sticking together so hard I'd apparently become invisible as anything other than a wallet. My aunt tried anger next. She said I was being cruel, that she'd never expected this from me, that I'd changed. Money had changed me. Success had made me cold. I agreed with her. I had changed. Specifically, I'd changed from someone who accepted being disrespected to someone who didn't. I asked her if she remembered what she'd said about keeping me around. I asked her to repeat it now, to my face, and explain what she meant. She couldn't, of course. The dinner ended badly. My sister was crying. My aunt was furious. My mother asked if she could talk to me privately before she left, and I said yes. Everyone else stormed out, though storming is hard to do effectively when you're terrified about where you're going to live in 2 weeks. My mother and I sat in the living room after they left. She told me she didn't blame me. She said she'd watched them use me for years and had tried to say something, but I'd always seemed happy to help. She thought maybe it made me feel needed. It had, I admitted. But there was a difference between being needed and being used, between being appreciated and being kept around for utility. She asked me if I was really going through with it. I said I was. She nodded slowly, then said she thought it might be good for them, that maybe they'd never learn to stand on their own because I'd never let them fall. I hadn't thought of it that way, but she might have been right. Update 1. The 15 days were interesting. I got a lot of phone calls I didn't answer. A lot of text messages that ranged from apologetic to threatening. My sister's husband tried to negotiate, suggesting they could start paying rent, offering an amount that was about a quarter of market rate. I declined. My aunt tried the family card again through a series of increasingly desperate voicemails. Then she tried having her daughter, my cousin, call me. My cousin had always been decent to me, and the conversation was awkward. She said she understood why I was upset, but asked if there was any way to work something out. I asked her if she'd known how her mother talked about me. The silence on the other end told me she had. I said I was sorry she was caught in the middle, but the decision was final. My sister showed up at my office on day 8. Security called to ask if I wanted to see her. I said yes, mostly because I was curious what approach she'd try in person. She came in looking tired. The tears were gone, replaced with something harder. She sat down across from my desk and said I'd made my point. That she was sorry, that my aunt was sorry, that they understood they'd crossed a line. She said they'd made a mistake, but kicking them out of their homes was too far. I asked her if she understood what she'd actually said at that dinner, if she got why it bothered me. She said it was just a joke, that they didn't mean anything by it. That's when I knew nothing had actually changed. She was sorry she got caught, sorry there were consequences, but she didn't actually understand what she'd done wrong. I was still overreacting in her mind, still being too sensitive. The problem wasn't what she'd said, it was that I'd heard it. I told her the eviction stood. She called me a bastard and left. Day 15 came. My sister and her husband were gone by day 14, actually. They moved in with his parents 2 states over. My aunt held out until the last possible moment, then moved into a small apartment she could barely afford. I heard through my cousin that she had to get roommates. My mother called to check on me. She asked how I was feeling. I said I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying something heavy for years and finally set it down. She said she understood. Update 2. 3 months later, my sister called. Not texted, called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice sounded different. Smaller. She asked if we could talk, really talk, and I said okay. She told me living with her husband's parents had been hell, that it had forced them to actually look at their finances, their choices, their life, that they'd both gotten second jobs, that they were saving for their own place, really saving, not just talking about it. She said it was hard, really hard, but they were doing it. Then she said she was sorry. Not sorry she got caught or sorry there were consequences, but sorry for treating me like an ATM. Sorry for taking advantage of my generosity. Sorry for making jokes at my expense while living in a house I provided. I asked her what changed. Why apologize now? She said her husband's mother had asked why they'd lived rent-free for 6 years. When my sister explained that I'd been helping them out, his mother asked what they'd done to deserve that kind of help, what they'd done to earn it or show gratitude. My sister said she hadn't had an answer. that the question had kept her up at night for weeks. I appreciated the apology. I told her that. But I also told her I wasn't sure where we went from here. That trust wasn't something you could rebuild with one phone call. She said she understood. Then she asked if maybe, eventually, we could get coffee. Just talk. She said she missed her brother. I told her I'd think about it. My aunt never apologized. I heard from my cousin that she was telling everyone who'd listened that I'd betrayed the family, that I'd kicked her out over nothing, that I'd become a heartless corporate monster. My cousin said she'd stopped arguing with her about it. Some people never learned. 6 months after the dinner, I met my sister for coffee. It was awkward at first. We made small talk about her kids, about her new jobs, about the apartment they were saving for. Then she asked about my life, and actually listened to the answer. Really listened, not just waited for her turn to talk or to ask for something. She told me she'd been in therapy, that her therapist had helped her see patterns she'd been blind to, ways she'd been entitled without realizing it, ways she'd used people, especially me, without considering the cost. I asked what made her finally go to therapy. She said it was hitting rock bottom, realizing that she destroyed her relationship with her only brother over pride and thoughtlessness, realizing that her kids had noticed the tension, had asked why we never saw Uncle anymore, having to explain to them that she'd messed up badly and was trying to fix it. We talked for 2 hours. It didn't fix everything. Wounds like that don't heal over coffee, but it was a start. A real one. Update 3. A year after the dinner, my sister invited me to her new place. They'd saved enough for a small house. Actually small, not the 4-bedroom I'd been providing. She gave me a tour like she was showing off a mansion. Her husband shook my hand and thanked me. Said what I'd done was harsh, but necessary. That they'd been sleepwalking through life, and I'd woken them up the only way that would work. My nephew, who was 8, showed me his room with this enormous pride. He told me his mom said they'd earned this house, that they'd worked really hard for it. I could see it meant something to him in a way the old house never had. We had dinner, nothing fancy, just spaghetti and salad, and it was better than any catered meal I'd ever paid for. My sister seemed happy in a way she hadn't been before. Not comfortable or complacent, but satisfied. Proud. She walked me to my car when I left. She said she'd been wanting to tell me something, but hadn't known how. I waited. She said I'd saved her life, that she'd been drowning and didn't know it, that I'd thrown her a lifeline by cutting her off, as backwards as that sounded. She said she was finally standing on her own feet, and it felt good. Felt real. I told her I was proud of her. She cried a little, then laughed and wiped her eyes. She said she knew we still had a long way to go, but she wanted me in her life. Not as a bank, as her brother. I said I wanted that too. My aunt never came around. Last I heard, she was still bitter, still talking about how I'd betrayed her. My cousin apologized for her mother, but said some people were determined to be victims of their own story. I told her she didn't need to apologize for someone else's choices. The thing about that dinner, about that one comment that changed everything, it wasn't really about the words themselves. It was about what they revealed. That I'd spent years thinking I was building relationships when I was really just enabling dependency. That generosity without boundaries wasn't kindness, it was self-destruction. I still help people. I still donate, still support causes I believe in, still help my mother when she needs it, though she rarely asks. But I do it differently now, with clear eyes and clear terms, with respect for myself and what I'm offering. And I never, ever accept being treated like something people keep around for utility. I learned that lesson the hard way, but I learned it. Some people thought I was cruel for what I did. Maybe I was. But sometimes cruelty and clarity look the same from certain angles. I sleep better now than I have in years. That has to count for something.